Have you ever wanted to make a good first impression, right? First day of school, you get your clothes all picked out. First day at a new job, right? You want to do a good job. You show up hopefully on time, you have your hairs combed and all that stuff. You want to be prepared. You want to put your best foot forward and make a good first impression. You want to be impressive, right? Maybe not just first day at school or first day on a job. What about like first day at practice on a new team, right? You want to show them what you can do. Or how about this? First date, right? Okay. When I was in college, I wanted to make a good first impression with this girl. We'll say her name was Eileen for safety. And Eileen, I was interested in Eileen, and we had spent some time together, and so she was going home to visit her family. Now, I went to college in Missouri, and I'm from Arizona originally. What do you know? Phoenix, Arizona. What do you know? Thanks. What do you know about Phoenix? It's hot. Okay, now Eileen's family lives in Minnesota, like up by Canada, Minnesota. What do you know about Minnesota? You guys are with me. Okay. So, like, the warmest clothing I owned was a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt. That was just all you needed, right? So, this is the spring semester of my freshman year, and I am interested in Eileen, and she says, "Hey, I'm going home to visit my family with some friends. Do you want to come?" And like, this was way too early for me to meet her parents, right? Like, we weren't that serious. It wasn't that big a deal. But I was like, yeah, it's just a bunch of friends going to hang out up in basically Canada, and I'm interested in this person, so I'm going to go visit Eileen's family. We get there. It takes forever to drive up there. I don't realize how far away we are from this. We drive up, and here's the other thing that happened. A bunch of the friends that were coming kind of dropped out, and there was just a couple of us. Right? So I'm going to meet Eileen's parents, and what do I want to do? I want to make a good first impression. So I show up, and I'm there, and immediately what I notice about where she lives is it's freezing cold. And so I have like all my warmest clothes on, and I'm cold just in the house. We get there, it's in the evening, maybe 5 or 6 o'clock. It's already been dark forever, and she says, "Hey, my dad and my little brother are going ice fishing. Why don't you go with them?" Has anybody here ever been ice fishing? If you get the chance to go ice fishing, do not do it. Okay? We drive out to this lake that's frozen, and we pull out this like shelter, but it's really just like a plastic tent, and we drill a hole but it's not like an electric drill. It's like like get this hole into the ice, and then we just sit there and freeze for hours. And I'm like trying to make conversation. I'm like, "So where are you from originally? And what's your family like?" And he's as mad that I'm there as I am that I'm there, right? Like, he has no interest in making a good first impression on me. He has no interest in getting to know me. So it's rough, right? Not going so well, a good first impression. Next day, we go back, we get warm. We're going to go out with her family, her little brothers and sisters, and we're going to go ice skating on this other frozen body of water because everything's freezing. And so we go out into this frozen body of water, and when we're out there, I grew up rollerblading because we don't have frozen things in Phoenix, but I'd been to like an ice skating rink, and so I knew how to ice skate, and I thought, I'm going to like impress her little brother with my ice skating skills. Here's the thing about ice on a lake or on a river instead of just like in an arena. It's like bumpy, right? It's not just like flat and smooth and perfect. And so I'm like racing him, skating, like trying to make a good first impression, at least not with the dad, maybe with the rest of the family. And I immediately eat it and land on my face, and I am bleeding, like so much blood is coming down my face. It's like so bad, they're getting people from like the shack that's where they sell hot chocolate. They're like, "This guy, he's going to die. Someone come help him." And they're like, oh, he's from Arizona. Oh, he's from Arizona. Oh. They just think I'm totally, totally incapable of doing anything. And so, needless to say, I did not make a good first impression on Eileen's family. But there's a great ending to that story. Do you know what it is? No, we broke up immediately after that. But then the next year I met my wife. And so it's a great ending to the story. And I did make a good first impression on her family. So we all sometimes want to make a good first impression. Our text this morning and every morning is Galatians 2, verse 20. Paul writes to this church in Galatia, and he says, "It is no longer I who live, but it is Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." That phrase, Son of God, what does that mean exactly? It's sort of like, Son of God. Well, there are three ways this gets used in the Old Testament. Three ways that Paul's sort of native way of thinking about the world through the scriptures that he has. Three ways that the word Son of God, the phrase Son of God gets used. Number one comes in Exodus chapter 4, verse 22. And this text is going to be up on the screen here. And this is when God is telling Moses about his mission to go speak to Pharaoh. And he says to Moses, he says, when you call my people out of Egypt to take them into the land of promise, when you go talk to Pharaoh, here's what I want you to say to Pharaoh. Thus says the Lord, Israel, the nation, the people, God's chosen people, Israel is my firstborn son. So one way that this phrase can occur is that it refers to the chosen people of God, the Israelites. Is that what Paul means? Maybe. The second way that this phrase occurs is in 2 Samuel chapter 7. And this is a story where King David, the greatest king in the history of Israel, has made a covenant with God, and God has said to David, you are the king that's going to sit on the throne. You have been obedient and faithful to me, and so I'm going to honor you. And this is what he says in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 13. This is God describing what's going to happen with David. This is verse 12. When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your ancestors, when you die, I shall raise up from your offspring after you, and shall come forth from your body. I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Listen to this. I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me. So the Son of God can be an Israelite. It can be a king from the line of David. Or, number three, Psalm 89, also common in the Old Testament. One example. Psalm 89, verse 6. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who in the heavens is like God? The psalmist answers the question. Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord? That phrase in Hebrew is B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. Who among the heavenly beings, who among the angels, the beings that are up in heaven with God are like him, are like the Lord? A God feared in the council of the holy ones, great and awesome above all that are around him. So, the Son of God can be an Israelite, it can be a king from the line of David, or it can be a heavenly being, something totally unlike a mere human. What does Paul mean in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20 when he says, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me, and the life I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God. An Israelite? A king from the line of David? A heavenly being? What does he mean? Always a good way to figure out what an author means is to look at what they say elsewhere in the same text, in the same letter. Later in Galatians chapter 4, verse 4, Paul says this, when the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son. God sent his Son. An Israelite, a king from the line of David, a heavenly being, born of a woman, born under the law, in order to redeem those who are under the law so that we might receive adoption as children. And because you are children, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a child, and if a child, then also an heir through God. And in verse 7, when it says you are no longer a slave, but a child, the Greek word there is son, weos. Jesus, as the Holy Son of God, actually makes believers holy sons of God. Kings, the chosen people of God, heavenly beings. Now, imagine, if you would, for a minute, if you were going to become a human being and you're a God, how would you do it? What would you look like? What would you what might you do? You might imagine that you'd be like the most beautiful person you can imagine, right? So I was surveying the band backstage, asking like, who's the most beautiful person? Present company excluded. I don't want them to be like, oh, Aaron, so dreamy, And so I got some of the answers. See if some of these resonate with you. Brandon Lake. I thought that would get less than enthusiastic response. Michael B. Jordan. Okay. Justin Bieber. We're in our feelings about Justin, the Biebs. Ronaldo? Cristiano Ronaldo? Wow. A lot of thoughts. Chris Hemsworth. Thor. Okay. Ryan Reynolds. Okay. But if you were a God and you were gonna reveal yourself, you'd want to be beautiful and powerful. You might look like John Cena, like all big and muscly and powerful to show what you are. And one of the interesting things, I brought this text, it's from the Enuma Elish. This is the ancient creation story of the Babylonians. So this is another culture from the people from around the time that the Old Testament is written, like the time of Isaiah. And the Enuma Elish, it describes, we can put up on the screen here, it describes this guy Marduk, who is a god. And when Marduk is born, this is what Marduk looks like. His figure was well developed. The glance of his eyes was dazzling. His growth was manly. He was mighty from the beginning. His members were incomprehensibly wonderful. Incapable of being grasped with the mind, hard to even look on. He is so beautiful and so powerful. Keep going. 4 were his eyes. Why? Because he sees everything. 4, his ears, flames shot forth as he moved his lips because he speaks and it's just powerful. And his eyes likewise took in everything. His figure was lofty and superior in comparison with the gods. His limbs were long. His nature was superior. If you were going to show up and make a first impression, it would be one like this, right? And what does the Son of God, Jesus, do at just the right time when he's born of a woman? How does he make his big first impression? Luke chapter 1. He goes to a young girl, probably not much older than a freshman in high school. Poor family. And says, you will bear the Son of God. Luke chapter 1, verse 35. The angel said to her, to Mary, because she's like, hey, listen, I'm in freshman biology, but I know that, I'm a virgin, so how do I have a baby? And the angel said to her, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child to be born will be holy. He will be called the Son of God. And he's not a giant who's perfect and majestic and beautiful and all of the things that if you were going to draw a God in your imagination, he's not a Marvel character. He's a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes, and placed in a manger. A baby. How many of you have ever been around babies? Here's the thing about babies. She's not a fan of babies over here. Babies are disgusting, objectively, right? I have 4 of them. Okay, I have 4. They're older now, but when they're initially born and you're so excited and then they show up and it's just like this bloody red lizard and you're just like, like, this is a God? What? And Mary gives birth to Jesus. And it's this celebration because God, when he shows up among these lowly shepherds and poor people and says, here am I. Why did the Son of God wrap flesh in Galatians 4? To redeem you. And it's joy and it's celebration and it's Christmas morning and everybody is happy and everybody is exciting. And it reminds me of my friend Miguel when he first heard about Jesus and he's just weeping with joy and thankfulness because of what God has done for him. And it's a celebration. And it's joy, and it's singing angels, and it's singing shepherds. But if you follow Jesus for a little while, maybe this isn't your first move, maybe you've been doing this a little while, you learn pretty quick, it's not all rainbows and lollipops, right? That following Jesus sometimes is really hard and painful and difficult. And so you have this story of first impressions. There's actually 4 of them in the New Testament. One comes from Luke chapter 1, and there's another one in Matthew chapters 1 and 2. And then Matthew's story, instead of celebrating angels and singing shepherds, you have instead a murderous king. The Son of God is born and wrapped in swaddling clothes and placed in a manger. And the one who sits on the throne says, no, this is my throne. I don't want a rival king. And so Jesus comes, and when he comes, it's into a world of death and despair and darkness. And maybe that's your world. Maybe for you, this is not all rainbows and lollipops and singing angels and shepherds. Maybe it's like my friend Joni. My first preaching ministry was at this little country church, and I was preparing a message on Matthew 1 and 2, and I'm trying to think about how do I preach the Christmas story. It's Thursday, I get a call. Hey, listen, Joni was in a car accident this morning. We need you to come. I drive to the church. I go to Joni's family. I go sit with her mom, Connie. Joni that morning, she's a single mom. She'd gotten up early to go to Walmart to ring the bells for the Salvation Army. And in this freak accident, somebody hit her in a head-on collision, and she died, leaving behind her 3-year-old daughter, who all she had was Joni, her mom. And the story of Christmas is a story of singing angels and celebration and joy to the world, but it's also a story of a God who enters death and despair and darkness and brings hope. I don't know which first impression you need to hear about. I don't know if you need to hear about singing angels and shepherds, or if you need to hear about a God who enters into your darkness. But I do know this, that the Holy Son of God, the Holy Son of God who reigns over us, who redeems us so that we can join him in sonship, he's the one who reigns, and he doesn't do it by being powerful or beautiful or mighty or overwhelming you. He reigns with a holy love. Father, I pray that this week, as we are studying through Galatians, as we're studying through the life of your Son Jesus, I pray, Lord, that we would get a sense for what he wants to do in us, to redeem us and transform us, to make us his sons and daughters, to do the holy work that you've called us to do. And I pray, Lord, this week that you prepare these students to be transformed.